Howdy. So as you can tell, I'm going somewhere. Believe it or not, I do actually go places. So this week, the guest preacher will be preaching quite possibly on the Gospels passage. If not, then you can just ignore everything I'm about to say in the next 5 minutes. But anyways, what we're looking at here is a story of Jesus walking on the water. Now, last week we talked about the 5,000 people being fed, and what we talked about is that there are different theories about whether it was supernatural or whether it was more people sharing what they had and not realizing that they had it in advance. But this is one of those stories where it is meant to be miraculous, it is seen as miraculous, it is known as miraculous. But the thing is that with all of what's happening here is that the emphasis isn't even really as much on the fact that it's miraculous to be walking on water at a time when they didn't have like magic feet wear, but also realizing is that the big emphasis is for Peter to get out. Because the thing is that as we're looking at this overarching idea of Jesus being the Lord of creation, that's not the surprising part. If Jesus is the Messiah that he has claimed to be and has been doing all the miraculous things that we have seen him doing up to this point, then the fact that he's walking on water should not be the surprising part. The surprising part is the fact that he can bring someone else out there with him, but also the idea of whether or not Peter is willing to get out. And that's the thing about what we see is that Peter is willing to get out of the boat. It's not just a John Ortberg book. But with that is that what we see is that Peter being willing to get out of the boat is not the end of it, though. Is that as he's with Jesus, he is still freaked out. He is still scared. He still doesn't know what's happening. So even though he starts to walk on the water, he starts to sink. Because the thing is that oftentimes we're willing to get out of our comfort zone, but as soon as we do, and we realize what's going on, we get freaked out, we get scared. And that's the thing about comfort zones, is that they're comfort zones for a reason. We stay in them because we like them. And even if for a little while in our minds we're thinking, you know what, I can try something new, I can try something different, it doesn't take long before we start seeing the flaws. We start seeing the issues with the world around us and why it's scary and why it is that we don't like things the way that they are. And we're facing a lot of issues right now. Our world is changing very rapidly in a very short amount of time. And with that, we're going through a lot of growing pains, and we're mourning the loss of the world that we've known before. And it's going to be really hard. And our comfort zone is telling us that that's a bad thing because security is something that we have become used to, especially as Americans, well, U.S. Americans. So as we're thinking about this, what we need to be thinking about is the fact that when Jesus is calling us out of the life that we've had before, it's not meant to then get into a safe place. It's actually the opposite. But that's the thing about being able to see that new life is meant to be lived in such a way that we trust that there is hope of a tomorrow and that there is a future that goes beyond anything we see here and now, because then it gives us permission to try things that we're not comfortable with. But we have to be willing to acknowledge that. We have to be willing to say that, you know what, this is not going to be comfortable. I am not okay with this. But that's not what doesn't determine whether or not we should try it. This doesn't determine whether we get out of the boat. We don't get out of the boat because the waters are calm. We don't get out of the boat because everything looks nice. We don't get out of the boat because we can see the stepping stones. We get out of the boat because it's time to get out of the boat. And that's where we're at now. It is time to try new things. It is time to change things. We have to find the people that we haven't been comfortable looking for in the past. We have to reach out in ways that we weren't comfortable with before. We have to be willing to consider that the way that we've done things in the past was not necessarily the best way all the time. And it's going to be scary, and we're going to realize that there are times where we're very uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop. It doesn't mean that we need to go back. It means that we need to pause and ask, is this where we are being called? Is this where we are being sent? And if it still is, that we need to keep going on that very scary, very choppy water. And if we start to sink, is not to be scared of the sinking, but rather to look back at the one that we've been following all along. Because that's the thing about Peter, is that he was with the one person in the entire world that he was the safest with, and he got scared. So what is it that you're scared of doing right now? Or who is it that you're scared of reaching out to, that you know Jesus is saying it's time to get out there and do it?